Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this narration of the web series Solo Apocalypse, taken from Royal Road. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 18. I watched from above as third and fourth siphoned more gas. I'd lost count of how many trips that they'd done, but there was certainly no shortage of fuel. Parking must have been a nightmare for Skylar Industries. After standing there, in the center of the building, right in front of the doors where people had walked in, seeing that blood, not the scarlet color of life and oxygen, but the dark stain of obsidian crimson. Emotions bubbled in my chest, unbidden. That simmering chill. I thought the cold that came with that anger was indestructible, a glacier. But this hell had proven again and again that something could shatter it. I thought anger brought my focus to a razor's edge. Instead, I'd broken down, cried, vomited, and screamed. I've had nightmares for the past 2 weeks of dying, of failing, of all the twisted horrors that were still to come. I was paranoid, checking over my shoulder, feeling phantom pains where I was injured. It wasn't anger, truthfully. How could someone be sure of something like that? Maybe it was just a front, a ruse to distract myself from what I really felt. It was an emotion directed at everything, and yet nothing at all, pointless and meaningless. It was a familiar feeling, that sucking sensation of something worse than just muddy shoes, a black hole that drained all energy, a bottomless pit of quicksand at the bottom of the ocean. It was despair, hopelessness. I knew I was just some guy. I knew that. And I was no one special, no one near qualified to face whatever hell a field boss meant beyond the instinctive connotation. I wasn't military. I wasn't some great leader or fighter. I hadn't even graduated college. But damn, I wasn't about to give up. I didn't think of myself as a hero. The notion suggested I did this out of some desire to play out of fantasy. In a dream, maybe. Not this hell. Not this nightmare. Where a field boss existed that could take over someone's will, how much more would fall to the strap if this root mother hive mind was left alone? I'd spent the better part of 2 days watching it, dousing the floors, 3 of them now. It expanded by water. It was just a hunch that I felt more and more confident on. Every body of water, every pool it touched spawned those strange insects, unable to leave the water. It was why I hadn't seen anything possessed up until now. For the same reason, I hadn't been outright mind-controlled by the second I wandered through the small body of water. By sheer, dumb luck. The giant swamp tree's root system had isolated the creature from any larger bodies of water. Instead, its roots only accessed the small pools created by the large root systems of the swamp. It was cut off from any major waterways and couldn't spread further. But its tendrils were growing, creeping further, enough to see with the naked eye. Maybe a meter in length over the course of 2 days. I tracked down the longest tendril, watching it. It was still a long way from the edge of the clearing, but from there it was only a short reach to the waterlogged terrain that I'd been traversing for the last 2 weeks. It was only a matter of time. 3 floors were doused in gasoline. From the moment I walked in, the sweet smell was potent enough to give me a slight headache. I was cautious of the fumes, wearing one of the safety lab masks on each of my clones from the science building. If there was a smell of flammable fire, I hazarded, this was it. You think 3 floors is enough? I said, outside watching the building. From what I could gather from my observation, the root mother hive mind was in somewhat docile state. Its actual body didn't move very much, aside from the passive writhing motions of its roots. I attributed its lethargy to some kind of energy preservation, that it was focusing on growing its roots since it had no further information on its behavior. I was apprehensive, weighing the completeness of flammability against the time until it might summon more innocence to its mouth. It hadn't, not since I'd seen them the first time, thankfully. It had just served up to put more pressure on me. I was on a clock. I had no idea how the fire would realistically take to the building. 3 floors were a lot, and fire spread upwards, but I was nervous. I began dragging in any dry wood or flammable tinder I could find, branches, dust, etc., anything and everything that was dry. I had the manpower and, I hoped, the time to spare. Well, might as well do a fourth, I told myself, if I'm taking the time to do all of this. And so I did. Uncap a random car, feed the vine into the tank, suck, siphon, fill the jug, drag anything I could find that would burn into the building, climb 4 floors of stairs, douse the floor, repeat. It was hard, manual labor, all done through my clones who had half my physicality, which meant it felt all the harder and probably took twice as long. It was an easy price to pay for safety. I was taking virtually no risk. The problem was that it wasn't my life that was at risk. It was everyone else's. Solo instinct went off. It was something like an itch, a tick, an ache combined. Like something had caught my eye at the edge of my perception, only the equivalent to that as it related to other senses I had combined. A sudden, pressing, and an absolutely certain intuition. It wasn't my original self that was feeding it. It was my clones. Inside, I whirled around, feeling the building groan and creak, the roots and tendrils strewn about the floor and walls, normally dormant and lethargic, began to twist and turn, as if the entire building was stretching. The field boss. That was the only one aspect of solar instinct going off. The clones couldn't see exactly what it was that made them worry, what urged them to act, but no single part of me needed to. Only one needed to see for the whole. Every single person was walking towards the skyscraper. End of chapter. Chapter 19. We need to leave, I yelled to myself. The building was shaking, the roots swaying across the floor like tripwires. I couldn't be sure if the root mother hive mind could feel, but I was the last person who wanted to figure it out. It was unhealthy to refer to myself as we, anything to keep myself calm. There were people walking towards the doors again, this time everyone. We need to light the fire, I told myself, hating it, and risk everyone. I wasn't sure why, but giving my clones each one side of my conscience helped me work through the problem. They'll burn as they come in. Both of our eyes widened. The goblins. Where are the goblins? We ran through the hall, scrambling, and found our quarry. Taking one down nowadays was so brutally easy. No one should have had this much practice. Still, we took it down, and maybe the field boss wasn't paying attention, but it didn't react. I'd never risked this on a human. A goblin, though. I stared at my counterpart, holding a lighter in one hand, put it against the surface of the entire floor. Along with the next 3 floors would be up in flames. My clone stared at the goblin in my arms, struggling. We'd both pinned it against the floor, face down. Then we ripped the sapling out of its neck. It jerked, screaming. The noise was uncomfortable. I held firm, staring at it. I saw the roots spreading up and down its neck, piercing the skin. Die! The entire process didn't look pretty, nor peaceful. The thing was thrashing, genuine cries of pain. But it lived. I checked the floor pan, tracked the survivors outside, nodded to myself, and flicked the lighter, dropped it. It fell almost in slow motion, every sense of mine watching it, a catalyst of fire, a small flame no bigger than a candle against a field boss. I watched it as I ran, not for my life, but for everyone else's. The gauntlet sprinted away. I'd inspect the air to catch fire first. The first floor, it exploded in a fireball of roaring flames, tearing into my back with searing heat and sending me forward. Flames raced through the floor as if they were alive and hungry. I screamed like I was being boiled alive. My clothes melting into my skin. My world was fire and lava. Outside, my original self was writhing on the floor, suppressing the scream if only because it was a distant pain. Teeth clenched, knuckles white, something allowed me to power through, and I wondered if it was those extra points at will. It still didn't lessen the pain, the torture. Through inexplicable agony and fire, I stared at the people, eyes flicking between focus and glazed pain. They were still walking. From above, the first floor was blown out, glass and debris rained across the base of the skyscraper. The next explosion sent me to the ground inside. Outside, the shock wave and the heat were strong, a breeze and warmth. Below, it was a hellfire. I was thrown to the ground, pressed to the floor, flames around me, melting. Black smoke and water raining down, sprinklers. I laughed uselessly, thankful. I didn't realize it, but one of me had died instantly. I turned around, staring through the blazy haze of heat, and found the goblin first, on fire and dead. Every movement was agony, torture as hell, and somehow I found my feet. I raced to the exit, coughing and hacking, cutting my way through curtains of flame and drapes of smoke. Instead, I found the door blocked. A mountain of debris, another explosion. I staggered, barely conscious. "I'm not going to make it," I groaned. Not Third, who was down below. His throat was dry, instantly parched. It was Second, beside me, who spoke, calmer than I had any right to be. "Yo," I said, and he did, leaving me alone, unprotected. It was the most vulnerable I had ever felt since the first day. I couldn't focus enough to produce another clone to replenish myself. All I could do was watch, eyes glued to the chaos below, melted to it. Second rushed across the routes, moving with grace with months of practice, 2 weeks of moving through this terrain multiplied by my clones. I was no expert, but I was certainly experienced by now. He collided with the first survivor and ripped the sapling out. It was this, or allow them to walk into the burning building. Immediately, perhaps noticing due to proximity, the other thralls swarmed. I dodged around, solar instinct somehow allowing me to see holes between them and spaces where I could move. How I could move. Because I wasn't. I was staring at the field boss. All of the roots were writhing, curling up, away from the flames, drying up like worms in the sun. And I hadn't heard, not at first, but there was a noise in the air. More than just fire and flame. It was screaming, a terrible, high-pitched keening worse than anything I'd ever heard once I noticed it. It wouldn't leave my ears. Inside, my hand was against the wall. I was limping, coughing, barely conscious. My entire back was charred. My skin was boiling. The heat was scorching and... another explosion. And I watched the fourth floor collapse. In fact, the entire skyscraper folded into itself, collapsing a single story downwards. The weight of the entire structure erasing the first floor. Just as I watched, a guttural scream unbidden escaped from my throat. I was being crushed till I burned, and like a curse, was still conscious of it all. My entire body seized up, as if every bone and muscle should have been. My brain worked against itself, trying to feel what knew it should be lost. Phantom spasms conveyed through a clone, brought to the brink of death. A pain of existence that was paralyzing. The feeling of every organ crushed, my own ribs piercing my flesh, of knowing exactly how your insides felt on account of them being impaled, crushed, burned, and otherwise fecked with. I vomited, spewed, as I doubled over in pain, the torture, finally enough. Second staggered below, and he was swarmed. Focus! The word was yelled from the internal fog, from the bottom of a well, echoing upwards in fading intensity. Focus! Part of my brain woke up, and Second found his feet, tearing another sapling, punching, kicking, never drawing his knife. I needed to make another clone. I was in no shape to watch myself, but maybe I could. That didn't make sense. Why didn't it? My thoughts drifted past me, like wisps of smoke. Smoke? Why was that? I had the faint certainty that I was screaming when I passed out. End of chapter. I would quickly like to thank the Tier 5 members, Marky, Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Oakfield, Lord Azrakul, and it's difficult to pronounce. Thank you very much.